If there's one fundamental truth that connected brands understand, it's that your employee experience, your customer experience, and your brand experience are a three-part harmony. My guest this week is Pete Vomocil, and he's one of the nicest guys you're ever gonna meet. His genuine and playful style is helping brands step into what he calls the total brand experience. Theater?
My first career was in theater. I was a theater major in college, and spent the first 5 years of my career in live entertainment. So I actually joke that my career is 21 years this year. So my career can finally drink, and it needs to drink a lot these days. But in my first career, I was an electrician, so I did all kinds of lighting design. I did production management, stage management, touring. I spent 300 days a year on the road, in the early days. So, it was hotels, suitcases, and at some point I decided I'd had enough of life on the road. But that was my first career. So these lamps are a product of those skills, being able to, see something creatively, bring it to life through electricity and light. And, so my wife and I over the years have taken these Jim Beam decanters and turned them into to little decorative lamps.
Whoa. Talk about like multi-application. So multidisciplinary family, just hard stop right there. But also, I love the metaphor that is there in seeing the potential and seeing all the second lives that can exist in an item if you just take one step to the right and not see it as a decanter, but see it as just a holistic vessel and all the possibilities that exist in that vessel. And I feel like that's part of the ethos for you and for your family, is to see the full potential of everything that you encounter.
I would like to think so. Yeah. So, I credit my mother-in-law for the lamp idea. She is a crafter and can make anything out of anything. And so the inspiration originally came from her. She was making book lamps. And so she would find all of these books, she'd stack them up, and blasphemy, she would drill a hole through the stack of books and make a lamp out of them.
They weren't bestsellers, I'm sure, right?
No, no, I don't think so. I hope not. Okay. But anyway, so that was kind of the impetus. And then, my wife and I, prior to having small children who, are a danger to fragile things, we used to go vintage shopping all the time. And we started stumbling upon these old Jim Beam decanters, and they would make them for special events. This one was for the 1962 Seattle World's Fair. It's intended to be like a Space Needle, and the little top comes off, and you could have, poured yourself a Jim Beam right from the decanter. We found an artisan who made a shade for us on Etsy. The one over here, it's an Idaho potato with a skier on top, and some of them are so dang creative. We found one that's the state of Oregon. I'm originally from Oregon. My dad was a forester, so it's got trees all over the place, and made a lamp for him. So, seeing the potential in the ordinary, I think, is a theme for us for sure.
I love that. Well, the potential in the ordinary, how we first found our way to each other, and then the first mutual affinity that we found within each other is our love of Lego and sculpting these figures out of just tiny little plastic bricks. You're a big Lego aficionado.
Yeah, it's bordering on obsession. We
just exactly as Lego likes it.
I know. Well, you want to talk about a connected brand? I think Lego is a prime example. Yeah, and in fact, MK, I brought some. My studio is extra cluttery today because I brought some of my recent builds.
My gosh!
To show you.
I want to see.
Of course, the bouquet of roses
rose bouquet
for Valentine's Day. So
beautiful.
we just did this one, simple but powerful. Everyone is
Love it.
awesome. I love
that
this one.
We have
and the
that
message
one here
and the
too.
meaning. And the kids just love this, you know.
We love all the figurines. We also love to mix the figurines up outside of their colors too, to just like further accentuate that, like, yeah, everybody in their element.
My wife and I are going to Paris in April for her birthday. And so the way that I told her about this trip was I gave her the Lego set, of course, and we built it together as a family. This one is cool.
This one I haven't seen before.
So this one was new. We just discovered it at the Lego store this last weekend or 2 weekends ago. This is our family tree. And we love these little Instax Polaroids. And so my daughter mostly built this tree. It's got these little bird houses. It's got a little picnic with a camera. It's got, you know, flowers. It's got paintings, and it's the story of our family.
I love this.
So this one is really, really cool.
How personal that one is. Oh, this
Then of course, you know that I love these.
So cool.
Yeah, kind of nerdy, but I love this. This is the SX70 land camera one step. Mm-hmm. I've got the real one.
There it is.
But this was such a cool build, and it's got, you know, it's got the full mechanism. You can load the photos in there, and then it shoots it out.
It will do that. Wow.
And it really shoots it. Yeah.
That one, I feel like they didn't hype that one enough on the packaging on the exterior of that box.
I was not prepared, I must tell you. I kind of needed safety glasses for that one.
Yeah.
I think Lego is so interesting. You know, they had a renaissance a number of years ago. And in terms of the connected brand and connecting with their audience and knowing their, you know, being authentic to their roots and also being able to innovate and connect with their audiences, but also their employees. So, you know, I don't know how many folks have been to a Lego retail store, but they're magical.
You gotta go. You gotta go.
They're whimsical spaces. The employees live and breathe Lego. They are always happy to show you the latest build that they're so proud of. It's awesome.
Yeah,
the other thing, you talked about figures. So I think that the minifig thing that they do in the stores, so brilliant.
Yeah.
This is my wife and I. So I was a Boy Scout in the good days of Boy Scouts, and my wife, you know, in her dancing wear, and you know, we just build these little minifigs. My family built me this little minifig.
With the camera, that big
same
smile.
hairdo, the camera, the goofy smile. Yep. And for those who haven't been in there, they've got this this vat. I don't know. The vat is the wrong word, but you know, trays upon trays upon trays of bits and pieces. And you mix and match these things. They have to be making an absolute fortune on these, $10 a piece for 3 little minifigs. And it's more about the experience of building the minifigs, configuring them, discovering, connecting. And to the point you made at the beginning, like it's little plastic bricks, right?
Yeah.
And it's little plastic pieces. I keep expecting to have some kind of a bad experience with Lego.
Yeah.
You know, like I expect to buy a set and miss a piece or miss something and have to reach out to their support team and figure it out. Nothing.
No.
Like, I cannot think of one bad experience that I've had with Lego.
Consistent.
It's wild.
Reliable and timeless, right? Timeless while still staying relevant.
Yeah.
Right. They're not continuing to have the same same designs, right? They're trying different designs. They've branched out into different types of builds as well too. So their Technic builds are some of my favorite builds.
I know you love the Technic builds.
I love the Technic builds. It reminds me of my childhood. The Technic equivalency of my era, and I'm dating myself here, is Connects. I don't know if you remember the brand Connects.
Of course,
I would just play for hours, like building things, using my imagination to come up with different types of vehicles, motorcycles, cars, trucks, wheelbarrows, like just little things with just, a handful of different shapes and pieces. And that Lego has figured out how to bring in the nostalgia, help folks harness an aspect of themselves that feels left to the wayside as time and age and experience has kind of gone on, but still made the experiences relevant and relatable to their life's journey, like the trip that you and your wife are taking to Paris, right?
Yeah.
You can use those little elements to accentuate these experiences in real life that you're building around you.
And you just did what was it? The Land Cruiser build or the Land Rover?
The Land Cruiser. Yeah. It's, I'll tilt my camera up a little bit. It's right there. Just
there
above.
It is.
Oh yeah. This is my, I have a shopping list that, is all the cars I want to own one day. And that one
So
in
cool.
that color is top of the list. And what I think one thing that we share in common is that we're students of the game, which I know is typically like a pro athlete reference here.
Yeah.
But we're students of the game of marketing. We really take the time to observe and deconstruct the things that brands do that make them differentiated, that, for lack of a better term, make them feel connected. So where do you get your passion for studying the game, for really being a student of the game of marketing?
I think it dates back all the way to the theater experience. So people often ask me, how did you get from theater to marketing? And it seems like such an unlikely path. And I think it actually is the most obvious path, because theater is all about understanding audiences, and it's about creating experiences, and it's about suspending disbelief, and it's about working together with others to build something collaboratively. It's about 1,000 or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of details that come together in a meaningful way to create a piece of art in a moment. And I think the same is true of marketing, right?
Yeah.
We want to understand our audiences. We want to understand what motivates them. What are their needs? What are their hopes and dreams? How do we help them succeed? And it's not unlike creating experiences on a stage. And I'm you and I have had multiple conversations about connected brands, total brand experience, where we see some companies like Lego just absolutely winning the day, and others that have such an opportunity to connect not only with their audiences, but their employees, and create this total brand experience. And they just fall short of that. They think about the public facing or the outward facing view. They think about brand identity. They talk about messaging, positioning frameworks, and all the tactical, technical stuff.
Totally.
And they don't think enough about the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of micro decisions and micro moments that actually matter. So having gone through that experience of creating these elaborate productions where there are performers and technicians and designers and audience members, and you all are coming together to make a moment of magic. I think about that same thing in terms of marketing, and especially in terms of brand experience. And this idea that all of those pieces have to work harmoniously together to create what you ultimately want to create. And so if you think of it in terms of the holistic experience or the performance, it's the little details that stand out that are incongruent with the ultimate design or the connected brand that really stick out as opportunities to do things differently.
I love that. I mean, that right there, just that statement of the opportunity to do something different. So few folks look at their body of work when building brands as an opportunity, right? Rather than an obligation. They don't see it as the glass is half full opportunity to create an experience.
I think that there are a lot of brands that are struggling right now especially in tech, and you and I both know this world well, where for years it was awash with, there was so much liquidity in the market and there was so much capital floating around that it was just growth at all costs. And, some of it was lavish luxury and other of it was just waste. Now we've shifted to this new paradigm, which is a far more healthy place to be in terms of, a going concern business, where we think a lot about capital efficient precision execution, profitable growth over growth at all cost. My concern, though, is that we've swung too far to the opposite side, where now it's all performance marketing, cut the brand. We don't need to spend on brand. We just need performance. We just need delivery. We just need pipeline. And it's okay as a short-term, methodology. We all know that at any given time, only 3 to 5% of our audiences are actually in a buying cycle, right? Mm-hmm. It's this 95-5 rule, or the 93 or the 97-3, whatever you want to say. This idea that only 5% of our target audiences are ever in market for a solution like ours. And that means that we need to optimize for the 95% for long-term sustainable growth and long-term sustainable connection. Mm. And building the brand, and I'm not talking about over-the-top kind of wasteful brand spend. I'm talking about, like what you and I think, so fundamentally believe in and line up around, which is building connected brands through intentional interaction and design. Mm. This idea that it doesn't have to be luxurious, it just has to be intentional. And thinking about every touch point along the way, and every touch point as an opportunity, to your point, to connect. And it also has to be a holistic view. You and I have talked a little bit about this idea that we talk a lot about CX, right? The customer experience. We also talk a little bit, but not enough, about EX, or the employer, or the employee rather, experience. And I like to think of this equation as, CX plus EX equals BX. So the brand experience as the total. Yep. And that equation ultimately resulting in sustained profitable growth. Yeah. If you have unhappy employees, you're never going to have happy customers.
Right.
And so that's why I worry about some of these tech brands where you've got so many people who are on the edge. There have been multiple rifts. They're worried. They're unhappy. How do we think that our teams are going to deliver connected experiences if they're not in the right headspace, right?
I love that simple equation, EX equals CX equals BX, right? Like no part is bigger than any one part of that equation. And yet if you miss one of those parts, you are going to miss the mark across the board. If you don't have a brand experience, you don't have a customer experience, you don't have an employee experience. If you don't have an employee experience, you're not going to have the customer experience, and in turn the brand experience. They're all interconnected and interwoven into each other. Yeah. What I find so interesting for marketers now, and the irony is not lost on me that we're calling it performance marketing, and yet there is speaking to a theater junkie, where's the performance? Where is the entertainment? Where is the engagement and the attention to detail to create the experience for your customers, for your employee, and for your brand as well too? It's an interesting time that we're in right now, as folks are starting to recognize that they have diminishing returns on things that used to perform really well for them. That consumers, given economic conditions right now that are in constraint and in high inflation time, that folks' budgets aren't going as far. But the budgets that they are spending on things, both their professional budgets, but also their personal budgets, are dedicated to the brands whose values they most feel align and uplift their own personal values, as well as the quality and the standards of the products that they're using as well too. It's a really interesting inflection point right now that we're in.
It is very interesting. And not to spend too much time on Lego.
Is there a thing? Is that a thing? Can you do that?
I don't think so.
We haven't found it yet.
The modern Lego brand, though, you walk into these stores and they're whimsical and they inspire imagination and play and discovery, and they encourage you to be hands-on and play with the builds and look at the new bricks and play minifigs. I worked in I don't know, this was 18 years ago maybe. I worked with one of the Disney Imagineers, and we were working on, of all things, we worked on an opera together and we worked on a ballet together, where he was the scenic designer for both. So we did a Disney version or an Imagineer version of the Nutcracker and ballet, and we did a version of Hansel and Gretel, which was really playful. If any of you are familiar with Engelbert Humperdinck's Hansel and Gretel score, it's one of the most incredible scores out there. And this guy named Don Carson is a former Disney Imagineer turned scenic designer. Don and I used to talk a lot about whimsy and magic, and this idea that the more transparent the design became, and not in terms of actual transparency, but in terms of the design disappears into the background, right? It's so intentional that it becomes nuance.
Yeah.
And he would talk about his experiences at Disney and with the Imagineering team and working on some of the rides and some of the attractions at Disney. And it was always this idea of, can we create magic by being intentional enough about the design? And so I love that idea of creating magic. And people talk about that idea of magic around technology and, it just works, it becomes magic. And, I know Apple for a long time has talked about creating magic with tech. And I think about that coming back to the Lego store kind of concept. They've been so intentional in the design of the space, in how it works, in how they engage with customers, in even stuff like come in and buy bulk brick, like here's a container, buy bulk brick. They've just done a phenomenal job. I think every little detail is so dialed in. And so for us as a family, I'm embarrassed or proud to tell you that our Lego budget is a little out of control. We we go to Lego store probably, I don't know, once a week, once every other week, even just to build minifigs, right? And like I said, every time we walk out of Lego with one of these, it's $10 plus tax, right? So we normally, buy a few of those. And so we're spending $20, $30 just on minifigs. And it's more about the experience of going in and building the figs. And my kids, I've got a 4-year-old son, 7-year-old daughter. They absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And for them, it is magic. And it's not just a retail store. It's the Lego place that they can, just experience.
What I also think they're helping to do too is to give your family unit a gravitational pull that sits outside of some of the other constructs of our familial gravitational pulls.
Yeah.
So while I'm sure your kids are very excited by their new builds, their minifigs, and what they get to create, they're also just so enamored with the quality of time that they're getting to spend together as a family unit as well too. And when a brand can do that, when the brand can be a connective tissue or a facilitator of better interpersonal connection between a family member, between friends, between a company or a community, that is when you've achieved greatness as a pro marketer, as a pro connected brand, at least in my standard. And it's hard for companies to do this. I mean, I can imagine folks listening to us talk about Lego, right? It's like, that's it's Lego, right? Like they have an incredible advantage.
Of course.
And it can be hard for folks to sit there and say, I got a company that feels a little flat. The industry is flat. The product is a little flat. And it's hard for me to think about intentionality or performance or creating magic on a landing page with an email. Like, how do you help coach folks? Which we should also talk more about what you're working on as well too in all your spare time. Yeah. But how do you help coach folks with that mental hurdle to help them understand that it is really empowering that they have that opportunity, as we said earlier, and not the obligation to, poke a brand along?
You're right. I think Lego has an unfair advantage that they have legacy, they have whimsy, and it's not been without problem. I mean, they've had to adapt. They've had to evolve. And there was a time where Lego was a stagnant brand, right? And they were really in decline. And they did have to adjust. And the thing is, you look at their collections, and those product lines are adaptations. They're evolutions. They're evolving to satisfy the market need. So yes, there's magic there. I like to talk to clients about total brand experience and the fact that it's not just, it's not just moments of magic, but it's all of those intentional points. So I mentioned earlier, I think too often we think about brand kind of two-dimensionally. We think about it in terms of it's a brand identity, it's a logo, it's some uncoded Pantone colors. It's all of these kind of really kind of technical things. It's fonts, it's typography, it's font hierarchies, it's all of those things. And I try to help people think beyond the brand identity and beyond just simple awareness and the kind of the permeation of brand across everything that's done, right? And this idea that delivering delightful experiences is everyone's role, no matter what your role is in the company. So it's not just the CMO's role to be the steward of the brand, right? It's every frontline employee. It's every interaction with an invoice, with purchasing, with everybody. And it's easier said than done. And I think that there are a lot of brands that struggle as they grow. It's easy to maintain kind of a brand experience when you're small, when the teams are small, when you're, single location. It's much, much easier. Yeah. When you become large and distributed and multinational, the complexity increases dramatically. Yeah. And maintaining brand, I think, becomes very challenging. So I know you and I have talked about Starbucks as kind of an example.
Yes. My old stopping grounds.
Yep. It's some history there. We've talked about this disconnect with the intended brand and brand experience and the real or experienced experience. Yeah. So, you know very well, and I'm sure that a lot of folks who are listening do as well. There are company-run stores and there are franchised stores within the Starbucks model. It's an interesting choice for a company that's been so traditionally focused on creating experiences and creating brand experiences. I do think that those have suffered over the years. I think that there's been a decline in the experience from the original vision of the kind of, corner coffee shop.
The third place.
The third
Howard
place,
Schultz
right? The third place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think that the decision to open the brand up to franchise, yes, it increases opportunities for additional locations, and they've lost control of the brand experience in those franchise locations. So often you'll go in, they'll be out of stock. The employees are not at all connected to the brand. They don't honor the loyalty program. It's a completely disjointed experience. And from a brand perspective, I just can't believe that they do it. And now they have to have done the calculus to have figured out that, the brand erosion that we suffer from the franchise model is outweighed by the loyalty. Our customers will give us a pass.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that I've been frustrated over the years. I'm not a huge Starbucks person, but, I'm a loyalty card holder, and I go into some of the franchise stores and have kind of miserable experiences. And it's some of those smaller, like they're always out of stock. It's always something in those stores that creates those brand erosion moments. Conversely, I think if you look in the B2B MarTech space, one brand that I think is doing an admirable job of repairing what is a kind of marred brand perception is a company like ZoomInfo. So ZoomInfo, large, $1 billion+ brand, publicly traded, and they've been challenged by a lot of smaller and smaller market entrants who are more nimble and who are a little bit scrappier. And honestly, they had been suffering brand erosion for quite a while. And they, became kind of known as the $1 billion bully within the third-party data provider space. They've been doing some interesting stuff lately. I think Brian Law is in the CMO role. I think he's exceptional. He's been very aware of the total brand experience, and they've been making a lot of interesting moves around community, around social, and around changing the perception, and not just in terms of trying to, I don't know, put window dressing on. It's actually, Henry Schuck, the CEO of this, CEO and founder of this $1 billion brand, routinely now puts his personal cell phone, personal email address out on LinkedIn. He is responding, or they are responding to harsh criticism, and they're saying, yeah, that's fair. And we're making changes. So I know that they I think last week, in response to some criticism, changed their legalese for all contracted customers. And that's something that they didn't necessarily have to do, but they recognized that their brand is an important asset, and the total brand experience was being impacted by some threats from their legal department to departing customers. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's admirable. Is it perfect? No. And I think, Brian and Henry and team are doing an admirable job of focusing on their total brand experience and being accessible and making change and connecting with customers, even though it's not always perfect. It's not clean. It's often messy. And they're solving problems as they go. It's
funny you mentioned ZoomInfo because prior guests on the show, Mark Killens and Nick Bennett, are helping them with their community activation at ZoomInfo. And I think it's the perfect example to juxtapose against Starbucks. Again, a longtime employee. I worked there for nearly a decade. Partner number 1292230. I was there very early on. and like I should
ingrained.
I should say like partner, right? Like I was not a general manager to them. I was a partner because we all owned stock in the company. They offered part-time benefits they offer full-time health benefits, full coverage for part-time employees. And they understood that equation of EX equals CX equals BX. They understood that. But at a certain point in time, they stopped taking in two critical feedback cycles between their customers and between their employees in the pursuit of building a brand that prioritized revenue generation over all of the X's, right? C, B, and E. And Zoom Info had a critical decision point where they actually could have ignored the feedback they were getting in the market. They could have gotten distracted and frenetic about competitors swooping in. But what I really admire about their preservation of the customer experience and the brand experience is that they took a step back and they accepted the feedback they were receiving and they decided to confront it head on and do something with it. And their intentionality of galvanizing a community to create tighter, stronger, faster feedback loops so that they could ingest input, metabolize that, figure out what they needed to do to accelerate the things that were working really well or decelerate and pivot on things that were no longer serving them is one of the best investments they've made in their brand. And as they galvanize and bring back those three X's, the triple X, employee, customer, and we'll workshop that one.
We need to workshop that one a little bit. Yeah.
But they bring back, all those pieces working in harmony with each other. Their brand is now starting to really come together and have a strong through line and narrative. In their approach. Two other brands that I think did this really well as well too, Reebok and Champion. Two brands who were, obsolete as soon as we crossed the threshold into 2000, but who came back swinging in the next decade with Reebok, with their partnership with CrossFit, and Champion just with their, I think their branding became a really important part of their ability to succeed and hear from their community what style, what types of clothing folks are really interested in. But to your point, if you don't listen to the community, if you don't take that feedback in, and you don't look at the totality of the experiences and I'd say the vulnerabilities in that experience where brand erosion can start to happen and really focus in on how do we perfect those so that, we have the opportunity to make them part of the scenery, right? Like it's a thing that is moving the scene along. You may or may not see it, but it's a detail that is so important to us. We're not going to sacrifice what this means to us, because that will in turn sacrifice what this means to you. And you will no longer like the experience end to end that we are creating for you from our brand.
I think that's so well said. You and I have talked a lot about meaningful connection and real relationship. And those necessitate bidirectionality, and they necessitate conversation, and they necessitate listening. And to the point you just made so eloquently, I think that's what connected brands do well, is they listen more than they speak. And they really value meaningful connection over just, hubris and celebration.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of companies talk about putting the customer at the center of everything that they do. And yet they don't actually do that because they forget about this equation. We'll workshop the name. I don't know what it is, but they forget about the equation, and they think that putting customer at the center means shouting about all the customer successes that they've had and touting all the case studies. But then when they actually get critical feedback, they don't stop and listen, and they don't internalize it, and they don't take a pause to then turn around and be intentional with that feedback in designing that magical experience, which again, I think is just a culmination of all the micro experiences, however small they are. It's about creating those intentional brand moments and that bidirectional communication with customers, employees, partners. I mean, the whole ecosystem, right, is critically important in that, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that you just highlighted in that, at least for me in particular, is that the feedback loop is super, super important. And using that feedback loop to be able to understand how you're weighting each of the three most important parts of your experience and making sure that they're in balance with each other. Because arguably, that we can pick on Starbucks a little bit more.
Why not?
Because, there was that time period where they had a record label. This was after Howard Schultz, the CEO and founder, stepped down, and they launched a record label. Which for the brand experience was actually kind of a cool and novel idea. They were already playing music in the cafe. Why don't we just own the rights to the musicians that we're bringing into that makes a lot of sense from us, right? It's a cool brand experience to make it feel like, they're much more connected to the label.
Yeah.
But what the fundamental flaw was for the employee experience was that there was a day where we were required to play Paul McCartney's album the entire day, almost for an entire week. And we were losing it because it was the same 12 tracks all day long. You work an 8-hour shift. That is a lot of Paul McCartney. And he is a great, great artist. Don't get me wrong. But that's a lot for the employee. So the employee experience was completely sacrificed. And then the customer experience was also sacrificed as well too, because not only were you in there like trying to figure out coffee, they were trying to do too many things in the retail experience. You walked in and there'd be a DeLonghi, like $1,000 espresso machine, and then all these coffee beans, and then an entire rack of CDs for you to buy, and then a pastry like display case, and you're just like, I'm overstimulated. What am I supposed to focus on here? Yeah, I just came in for a grande latte. What the heck, And so they prioritized the brand experience, but in doing so didn't keep the balance with the employee and the customer experience. And the feedback loops, as you're talking about, are very much meant to make sure that all investments in the employee experience, the customer experience, and the brand experience are kept in alignment and in complement of one another. One should not outweigh or overcompensate for the other.
That is such a brilliant point. I think the constant calibration and the balance between those things is so critically important. It's not a set it and forget it. This is brand is not a destination. It's a journey, as cliche as that might be, right? But it's not a set it and forget it. And there is continual adjustment. The market evolves, customers evolve, employees evolve. And if you're across multiple geos and you've got localization, then you've got cultural evolutions to all kinds of tweaking. I'd like to think about as refinement and calibration, and it needs that listening component. It kind of continuous listening and continuous feedback loop.
I mean, of all people to give the advice about listening, one thing we haven't talked about is your project, #open to help, which is all about listening. And it's, to steal your term, calibrate, like to help calibrate marketers who are in a position of needing a tune-up, needing an oil change, bringing the car in for just a quick checkup here. Tell us a little bit more about Open to Help.
Okay. Open to Help was an accident. Most days it still feels like an accident, if I'm honest. So the short story is that in September, I ended 5 years with my last company. And I went from having a team to being a solo operator. And, at the time I had not a huge, but a reasonably large team. So I spent a lot of time in one-on-ones, professional development, helping create environments for success, removing roadblocks, creating, resources, serving team members. When I went solo, I didn't have that anymore. And I looked around and I was spending time on LinkedIn, and there were obviously a lot of people who needed help, in all kinds of different capacities. Some, had been recently laid off. They'd been impacted by a RIF. They were worried about an upcoming RIF, or they were just trying to survive the madness of unrealistic targets and slashed budgets, and how do we survive this? And so I looked across LinkedIn and I saw there was open to work and hiring banners as the two options to put frames on your photos, as signals to the market that you're either looking for something new or you're looking for someone new. And for me, that didn't quite I wasn't in either of those camps. I wasn't looking. I also wasn't hiring. And so I wanted to extend that service to others. And so one day on a whim, I created a photo frame that was open to help. And it doesn't exist, so I had to hack it together and, put it on my actual photo.
It looks real. It looks like it exists.
I tried. And then I created an open to help tile that was similar to the open to work tile, but it was yellow and kind of matched my, I have a love for yellow, and I just put it out there, and the response has been really awesome. Just to give you an idea, so what I do is I've got 6 30-minute slots every week that I devote to open to help calls. I do 3 on Tuesday, 3 on Thursday. I do them in the afternoon, kind of as my brain is kind of moving out of productive mode, and I'm ready to switch gears into something. I block those slots, and then I open my calendar. I have a specific Calendly set up, and anybody who wants to can click my book appointment link on my profile and book one of these one-to-ones. So a couple things, MK. I just did, I think, 115th call yesterday.
Bravo.
And yeah, it's not terribly scalable. So I can do 6 of these a week, and it's about all.
Yeah,
right. There's one of me.
Yep.
And I also don't want to own it. I don't want it to be Pete's open to help thing. My genuine desire is that it becomes a third banner on LinkedIn. Now, I am not naive enough to not understand how LinkedIn works and how LinkedIn makes money. Mm-hmm. They make money through recruitment. They make money through advertisement. And, something that is kind of altruistic in nature may not fit the business model. So I may be overly naive to think that I can get LinkedIn to create an open to help banner that basically will lift up all of the LinkedIn network. It has been awesome. I hope I'm helpful along the way. I hope people keep booking. My posts about open to help they seem to be demoted by the algorithm if I look at some of the statistics. But it's people helping people. It's my attempt to try to speak goodness into the world, to give without expectation of return, and to employ some of the leadership principles that I practice when I'm in a role, which is just genuinely trying to help people succeed and creating that environment for success. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the connection as well. Meeting all kinds of new people from all around the world, first-time marketers, folks who are, questioning, should I even be a marketer anymore? I used to want to be a CMO. What do you think about that? How is it changing? We just have some really great and cool conversations. And so far of the 115 that I've had one maybe where it lasted 5 minutes. The person showed up. I said, how can I help you today? And they said, actually, I really don't know. I don't know why I scheduled this call. and it was awkward, and again lasted 5 minutes. We didn't do anything beyond just pleasantries and then hang up. But most people come with really thoughtful, intentional, here's what I'm trying to do, here's what I would love feedback on. I had some awesome conversations yesterday with one was with a content creator who's brilliant, and I just see their content on LinkedIn, and I always think it's just so engaging.
Drop
and
their name.
smart and funny. I don't want to out any of my, my open to help folks. I'm happy for them to raise their hands. But I kind of intentionally don't put out their names. I guess I should ask them if they don't mind me saying something. But anyway, content creator, top of funnel, brilliant. And it's like, well, how do I actually do the rest? Right? Like I can stand out, I can grab attention. What about conversion? What about measurement? What about the actual, funnel? What about like all this stuff? And really fun, kind of interesting conversation. It's been a happy accident.
It's an amazing happy accident, as Bob Ross would say.
Yeah.
Happy little trees
happy
out there,
trees,
growing tall.
Happy little accidents.
Your nourishment and the help.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think one of the theses. I have that thing.
It's one of them. Yeah. We'll workshop that one too.
Right after we workshop the BX,
the CX thing.
Triple X. We'll get that one.
We'll get
stick
something
the landing.
Different.
Is this thesis I have is that there are nodes in a connected brand. And a node is just in the same principles of electricity, is a conduit of multiple circuits of energy. And there are nodes within an organization. And then I also think that there are nodes inside of a community as well too. And I do think that nodes can be really, really powerful, especially if they're not directly connected to a brand, if they're connected to an ethos, to a mission, to a value that folks really need and rely on. And I think what you've built with Open to Help is a node infrastructure to help folks come in, find the energy that they need, and then reroute themselves into a new direction with that energy source. So congrats. It's really remarkable.
Well, I love that idea, and thanks. It's my little attempt to make a difference in the world. Yesterday I posted about my grandpa Jim and the impact that he had on my life. And he was both a professor. He was a tenured professor. He was also a farmer. And so he was wicked brilliant and also, kind of tattered around the edges from an appearance perspective. I think part of farm culture is you just lend a hand, right? It's just people helping people with not an expectation of return. It's neighbors helping neighbors. It's, fixing fences. It's just helping each other out. And that was a lot of how I grew up. I grew up on the farm. We were raising Christmas trees. He had a little bit of livestock. It was an interesting farm experience. And always helping neighbors with no expectation of return. And that's what Open to Help is. It's that. It's neighbors helping neighbors. It's community members helping community members. And, it's just paying it forward. So I ask three things when I speak to everybody, and we're wrapping up the calls. I say there are three things that I would love for you to do if you're willing. There's no expectation of return, but these are the three things. One is keep me posted. So let me know how it goes. Keep in touch. I want to be the first to celebrate with you when you overcome whatever it is that we're talking about, whether it's new job, whether it's a career transition, whether it's you've gotten through, you've broken through on a strategy. Just keep me posted. I want to celebrate with you.
Yeah.
The second, as cliche as it sounds, is pay it forward when you're able. A lot of these folks, I think over half are probably looking for their next job. Either they're miserable in their current role or they've been laid off. And so I ask, when you're in a position to do it, if you can pay it forward, that's all I ask. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing is, hey, I'm trying to make Open to Help a thing. Not necessarily, I don't want it to be my thing. I want it to be the world's thing and LinkedIn's thing. I just want more people lifting each other up. And so if you see one of my LinkedIn or, one of my Open to Help posts, just engage with it. Or, if you feel so inclined to write a few words, and let's just create groundswell around meaningful connection and people helping people. And so those are my 3 asks at the end of every
I think
call.
They are very reasonable asks, those 3. Yeah. I love to see the positivity that comes across my feed with those posts and with all of your other posts as well too. And if our listeners want some of that positivity, how can they find you? What's the best way to find you on LinkedIn?
Sure. I'm just Pete Vomocil or P Vomocil at LinkedIn. Please reach out, connect with me. And MK, I have to give the same love to you because I think your posts are always so uplifting. What you all are doing at Loop and Tie in terms of a different approach to giving and meaningful connection and this idea of the triple positive impact, or I forget exactly what words you use to describe it, but this kind of win-win-win, truly a win-win-win, I think is so cool. Your focus on employee month and your programs around, hey, if you're struggling with budget and you want to highlight some of your employees and really lift them up, let me know. I think those are such cool things. And honestly, I think that you and I are cut from similar cloths in so many ways. I just appreciate so much about what you do, both in your role at Loop and Tie, but also within our communities. You and I are in several CMO communities together. And I just so appreciate you and your contribution to the world. So
that is so kind of you to say. Thank you. Oh, what a beautiful way to end the episode. That's so kind. Yeah, I think you just want to create the marketing that you want to see in this world. Yeah. I take that a step further, right? I want to create the world that I want to see in this world. Yeah. And I just so happen to have a position of privilege and a unique perspective that every little bit helps. And consider me amongst those of the membership of Open to Help, wherever I can and however I can. I'd love to help you. I'd love to help your community as well too.
I just love that.
So cool.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me. This has been a real treat for me. Let me know how I can help. The pleasure has genuinely
been all mine, truly.
Oh, good. Well, likewise. We're in the Mutual Adoration Society.
We are. Ooh, I think it's time for us to get some merch.
Yes. Can we do that? I need some merch.
We can help you with that. That's kind of a thing we do.
We know some folks, don't we?
Yeah. We know some folks. We could arrange that.
Well, this was really a fun way to end the week. It's a happy Friday, and thanks for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. My pleasure.